This video is going to help you learn to recognize and decode chord progressions in a really systematic way by following a very simple and straightforward recipe. Now, I love harmony, and learning chord progressions by ear was not always easy for me. In fact, it was next to impossible. But over time, I've trained my ear and refined this recipe that I use each time I transcribe a new tune, and I've gotten pretty good at it. So that's what I want to share with you today. This recipe works for chord progressions ranging from 2 simple triads to longer jazz tunes, and you don't need your instrument or the ability to write music, but those things are helpful. You'll find it complements other ear training you might be doing, and as your ear improves, you can continue to use this recipe on more and more advanced material. It really scales up. And the steps of this process will become automated and intuitive. I'm Hans at tuneindigo.com. Let's get started. This video is the first of a series where we're going to break down specific chord progressions and use this recipe to practice identifying them in music as it flows in real time. Now, a future video will outline a process for internalizing chord progressions that you want to really recognize. Now, if you want to suggest a chord progression you want to get your ear inside of to be the topic of such a video, comment it below and keep it in mind as you watch this recipe. See if you can apply it right away. I bet you can. In this video, we'll walk through the process with one specific chord progression. I'm not going to tell you what it is because you'll figure it out as we go. Now, it's easy enough for beginners to hear, and the chord progression is transparent enough for you advanced musicians to focus on the recipe itself so you can use it on other stuff. I've created a little short piece to use as a model. You're hearing it right now. And we're going to use that as we walk through the steps. For those of you who are looking for quick fixes and hacks, I'm sorry, this is not one of those. Each of the steps requires practice and attention, and you can practice on any music, preferably something you really love. Now, we're going to use solfège in this video because it allows us to think in music with very simple terms. It eliminates a lot of the jargon and numerical thinking that applies to a lot of music theory. This is for your ear and for your soul. Now, this solfège stuff might be unfamiliar or off-putting to some, and it actually was to me. But the more you get this way of thinking in your noggin, the more easily harmonic and melodic patterns stick to your mind, pop out to your senses, and they find each other in your own mental neural network. Before we dive into the recipe proper, there's a little prep to do. This is where you listen open and free and allow wonder to find purchase in your heart and mind. You want to do this as a deliberate practice before getting really technical and focused to cultivate and energize the part of you that loves to listen to music and loves to make music. Then you dive in with our 2 main processes of this recipe. One is listening with the focus, and the second is documenting what you find. Now, you're going to go back and forth between these 2 processes. So let me tell you what they are, and then we'll get deeper into walking through this tune and finding this harmonic progression, which you advanced people probably already have figured out what it is. Okay, now, listening with a focus is where you listen to an entire section, which can be short or long, focusing on one single thing. And then you're going to document what you find in some combination of mental, physical, and kinesthetic map. Now, the map might be your mind, it might be an instrument, and it might be some piece of paper. I recommend using paper. I don't recommend using a computer because you want to be able to make a mess, and scientific neurological research is telling us now that the more you do physically writing things down, the more it sticks to your brain, and we want things to stick to our brain. Okay, so now here are the listening with the focus steps. First, you're going to measure it out. How long is it? How many sections or phrases does it have? So as this music goes by, check it out. Right? Now it happens that this music that I've created for you has 8 measures, basically 4 little phrases. And each little phrase has 2 little parts, 2 chords. you might mark up on your paper that it's got 4 little sections or 4 lines, and you want to leave yourself enough space on your paper to make that work. The next step is focusing on form. Notice same and different. So let's check that out. We're listening for same and different. You might have noticed that the first and the third phrase are similar, almost the same. You might have also noticed that the second and fourth phrases are almost the same. And by noticing what's the same, it eliminates work. It takes cognitive load off our working memory and allows us to focus on stuff that we don't know. Now, you might have also noticed in your focus on form that there are really only 2 chords, right? And they just go back and forth. So that's an important thing to notice. Again, it gives us less to think about. Okay, now let's listen with a focus for the main melody. Observe in yourself how much of this you can chunk down. Now that you know the form, you know how long it is, listen for the main melody. Okay, so now I want to have a chunk that's enough for me to sing and retain. Da, 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 da. Love it or hate it, there it is. That's a chunk. Da, 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 da. That's another chunk. And the next little bit. Da, 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 da. I can sing all of that, and maybe you can too. And then finally, da, 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 da. All right, very simple melody. The next thing is to turn it into solfège. Now, I can do this easily. It might take you some work. And if you like to use numbers, that's fine too. Okay, now we're going to chunk this down and we're going to spend the rest of the time working on just the first phrase, knowing that the first and the second chords get repeated. So I know that if I'm playing piano or guitar or bass in the band that for whatever reason would be playing this music, I can just learn the chords, right? So I'm going to focus now on the first phrase, and we're going to just get that one down. I'm going to turn it into solfège. So now I know that it goes mi, mi, fa, sol, la, do. This will get easier for you the more you sing in solfège songs that you know, songs that you're learning, and songs that you're improvising, right? So that's a topic for different videos, but your command of hearing tonally will greatly accelerate this process for you. So now that I've got that little bit of melody in my ear and I've turned it into solfège, I've internalized that chunk, I'm going to document it. And now it's out of my working memory, it's in a tangible form, and now I can move on to the next focus, which is listening for the bass line. So here it is. Now, there's some decoration in most bass lines, so we want to learn to hear through the decoration and into the root movement. And here we can clearly hear that it's going da, 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 da. Notice that I'm not singing down there, da, da. I'm singing in a comfortable place of my voice, which is very important. If you're a treble singer, you still need to hear bass lines, but you need to hear them and recreate them in your vocal range comfortably. Okay, so now that's that. We've got that da, da. Now I'm going to turn it into solfège using my tonal awareness. Do, da, da, da. Yep, that's do, da. Now, hearing that one can be a little trickier. Fa, it is fa. And the one way to confirm what it is, da, da, I always feel like fa is being pulled by me, which I don't always, it's not always there. But fa, I can always check fa against its sort of doppelganger or companion moon, me. The next step is to trace through the inner voices, seeking distinguishing tones and other colors. Now, so we've got a melody, we've got a bass line. Now, the bass line probably gives us the answer, right? But it doesn't always. If we got do and fa, and we can count to 4, do, fa, I'm going to move it up, do, fa, do, re, mi, fa. It didn't take long for me to turn my solfège into numbers. So now I'm going from a do-based chord to a fa-based chord. Now, there are a couple chords that can include fa in the bass, and one of them is the 4 chord, and one of them is the 2 chord in first inversion. So what we want to do is we want to determine if it's the 4 chord or if it's the 2 chord in first inversion. Now, here's the difference between the 2 chord and the 4 chord. Notice that they've got 2 common tones and 1 distinguishing tone. The 4 chord contains do, and the 2 chord obviously contains re. 2 chord is often found, especially in classical music, in first inversion. That means it's got fa in the bass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace through inner voices, seeking this distinguishing tone. Does the chord that has fa in the bass, does it contain do, or is re there? So I'm tracing to determine if the fa-based chord contains do or re. And as I'm humming, I'm letting the music go through my ear and into my mind, and I'm seeking re. And is it there? It's not. So now I know that it starts on the 1 chord because I've internalized the 1 chord because that's such a powerful home bass that we all want to have that down. If you don't have that one down, check out my tonic triad video that really goes deep into the 1 chord. Anyway, so now I know that the fa bass chord does not contain re. It does contain do, and that tells me that it is the 4 chord. Now, there's one other thing I need to check. What if it's a minor 4 chord? Those are really scrumptious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace through the inner voices. Now, what's the difference between the 4 major and the 4 minor? Well, it's the natural or the flatted 6. So I'm going to listen for la and see if it gets displaced by lay. So how do I get to la? In the tonic triad, I start with so, and I let myself go to la when I hear that 4 chord. I'm going to try to go to la, and if I get just pulled to lay, then I know that it's the minor 4 chord. Okay, now I'm going to trace through, starting on so, as the music goes along, I'm going to allow myself to get dragged up to la, and I'm going to query myself, does it feel like I'm just going up a half step? In other words, am I getting pulled up to lay? I didn't get pulled. So now I know that it's a major 4 chord. That's it. So now there's an extra bonus level, which is a topic for another video. And it's a topic for videos that I've already made, using the pivot technique, which gives us the sound feeling that the chord imparts on the tone of each of the main melody notes, using the pivot technique. Okay, so just very briefly, super briefly, every note in the scale, as we know, has its own quality, right? So we've got each one of those notes has its own sound feeling, right? Mi sounds like mi. Fa sounds like, has a quality. You get to decide what that quality is or how to describe it, but it has a quality. All right, now, here's the gold. If you can do this, you've just jumped up like 7 levels. Mi has a certain quality within the tonic triad. It still retains its meanness when I go mean. It's not mean. It still retains its sound feeling of mi when I go to the 3 chord, which has mi in the bass, in the root. But now the quality of mi is a little different, because now it's the root of a minor chord. Here it is the third of a major chord. Here it is the root of a minor chord. And now here it is the fifth of the sixth chord. It's still me, but it sounds different a little bit. It's got a little extra flavor or a different flavor. All right, so now you can now also listen to the sound feeling the chord imparts on each tone of the main melody or the bass line. Then you can test singing harmonic patterns you know well against the chord progression you are learning. So here's a quick thing you can just do as a little bump out. When you hear a song and you're like, oh, I think that's going 1 to 4, and you've internalized da 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 da, right? You've internalized do, mi, so, fa, la, do. You can just pop that in with your voice and confirm, right? So we've listened to this chord progression a bunch of times, and now we can do it with this pattern. Okay, so meanwhile, you've been doing each of these steps, and each time you do a step, holding a chunk in your mind, you go ahead and you document it. Now, you want to strive to capture consistently larger chunks over time. You want to increase the amount that your working memory can hold. Now, listening for form and listening for same and different and listening for how long things are, that certainly can help. Now, when you capture your chunks, you can use notation, you can use chord symbols, staff notation, Roman numerals, Dashville numbers, whatever floats your boat, and whatever works for you. You can even play it on your instrument. That's kind of capturing, as long as you've got the chunk firmly in your mind before you put it on your instrument. You can also, if you're into this kind of thing, you can create a memory palace or some other representation that glues your understanding of the chords and the music into your mind. But you want to strive to hold as much in your mind, in your working memory, as you can before documenting it. Just a few things to avoid. Avoid hunting and pecking. This whole recipe gets you out of hearing a thing and then scrambling to get it figured out. You want to avoid trial and error because that doesn't reinforce itself. Trial and error just keeps you guessing all the time. And you want to do more than one note at a time. Most importantly, you want to avoid going faster than you can savor. Be aware if you're feeling tense or if you're feeling panicked, you want to stay settled in to this place where you can savor and enjoy what you're listening to. I hope you found this helpful. Click the link in the description to get a free guide that covers today's recipe. And it also has the sheet music for my little tune. Maybe you got a name for it. Drop that in the comments. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about. And head over to tuneindigolearning.com to access more resources and offers to help you create your own unique music. Thanks for listening.